Hello everybody, today we'll be creating a new animation where when we tap something, it will split into 4 pieces then the pieces will then converge on the center and then execute the function that they're supposed to do when tapped. The button that we want to animate right now is just a normal button, continue. Let's change that so that it actually has a background and other stuff. We don't want to be splitting text, it wouldn't look that nice. Okay, and there we have the button that we want to animate. All of these effects, we will do them through a modifier. So let's create that one. We will call it SplitModifier. So a view that has this modifier is the one that will split into 4 and then execute a callback. And for now, let's just add the content. Now, because we want to split this into different parts, we need Geometry Reader since we will know the dimensions of the content. Let's run it as it is right now just by adding the Geometry Reader, and you will see what happens to views that are encased in this one. So remember that our button was center? Not anymore, it's in the top left corner. And why is this? So let's debug the view hierarchy. And here we can see why. Once we added our button inside a Geometry Reader, the view is expanding, taking up all of the space, and the alignment is in the top left. We can work around this issue with overlay. So let's hide the content, and in the overlay, let's add a Geometry Reader and inside the content. And now we have our view back with the expected alignment and size. Now that we have that ready, let's create 4 instances of the content because that's how we will do the splitting. We're not actually going to be slicing the view. We are going to create 4 different contents, and then we're going to displace them and clip them. So it makes the visual effect of the view splitting itself into 4 different pieces. When in reality, it's going to be, well, 4 views with different parts of it clipped. But first, let's use the Geometry Reader to displace the content. Since we want to make this animation for controls, meaning that when we tap on them, we expect something to happen, our split modifier will have an action that will be executed in the on-tap gesture. Because our split modifier handles the execution of the action, we no longer need a button, we just need the text. We need these async captors since we want to perform the animation of the splitting, and then we execute the action which may take the user to another screen. So we'll use, for now, let's use a spring animation. Let's see how this will work. And then let's move on to translating the 4 pieces. Let's worry about the clipping later. So with the translation, well, we will use the geometry effect to know how much we're going to be displacing the views. So for now, we will do it 1/4 of the height and the width in, well, different directions, since it's going to be the 4 corners. And we need to use these animating flags since when it is not animating, we just return the identity. All of the views are on top of each other. Now this was for one corner, let's copy and paste it and change some signs for the other corners. Now let's try this out. Because we'll tap on a continue button, and there we have our 4 instances of the continue button. However, it wasn't animated. The views will just snap into place. This was supposed to happen with a spring animation. Let's increase the distance here, and well, okay, so we do get the displacement, but nothing is animating. Okay, I didn't get the view to actually animate. My theory is that this is due to the geometry effect. So there's another way that we can do this using the size of the object, which is with a geometry effect. So let's create our split effect. Let's also create another enum, which is going to be corner. So we want to send the view to some of the four corners: top right, top left, bottom right, and bottom left. Okay, so for our effect, what we're going to do is a geometry effect. We have been doing this on previous exercises. So what we do is, in our geometry effect, we declare a percent variable. Then geometry effect has this variable called animatable data. We can declare it as a CE float, and in the getter and setter, we will use our percent. So the percent is returning the getter, and we update the percent in the setter. This is very important because this is how we can track the progress of the animation. SwiftUI is going to use this animatable data to reverse or progress the animation, and this is how we keep track of it. Now, how does this work? Well, let's say our split effect, we initialize it with a boolean, is on, and, well, a corner. Then the percent changes depending on this boolean, right? So we change it from 0 to 1, depending on the value of the flag. And this is what we will use in the method effect value. With percent, we know if the animation is ongoing or has ended. We guard against percent not being 1 or 0. This is when the animation is ended and it's either on the active or inactive state. For those cases, we return the identity. Before producing the projection transform for the ongoing animation, let's create first two helper methods that will give me the horizontal and vertical displacement depending on the corner that was used to initialize the effect. With these two functions, we can now move on to the animation. So we're going to split our animation right now into different stages. How can we do this? With percent. So when percent is in the first 25% of the animation, what we will do is create a transform with the translation. Now we need to calculate the relative percent for this stage, and we do that by dividing percent by 0.25, since we know it's going to go from 0 to 0.25 for this stage. With this, we achieve to displace the view horizontal and vertically in this first stage of the animation. What we want next is that for the next 50% of the animation, that is up until 0.75, we want the view to stay in that place, in the displaced state. So we want the view in the first stage to split, then it stays there for half of the duration of the animation, and then we bring it back to the center. Going back to our split modifier, let's remove the geometry reader, and instead of having the transform effect, let's apply the split effect. Okay, let's see the step and continue, and we do get the animation of the displacement. Just like we did when implementing the geometry effect, let's increase the displacement by moving it half of the width and the height. And now let's clip the view. We don't want the 4 buttons to be displacing, we want only a piece of it. So how we will do this? First, let's create a shape that will create a rectangle for a specific corner. When you create a shape, the method that you have to implement is path in right. And that path depends on what corner the shape was initialized with. So depending on the corner, we're going to draw a rectangle only in that part of the shape. So for example, for the top right corner, I just realized I was looking at this wrong. Top right, it's actually in the positive side. So yes, it shouldn't be the negative width. The top left and bottom left should be the negative width. I did get it right with the height. Sorry about that. Okay, so for our top right, we actually don't need to move to 0, 0. We need to move to half of the width. I'm gonna go quickly over this part since this is just creating a rectangle inside of another rectangle's quadrant. So depending on what corner is, we're gonna do it on a different quadrant. We have now our split rect that draws a rectangle depending on the corner. Now what? Now let's go to our split modifier. And how are we going to just show one piece of this? With clip shape. Clip shape takes a shape and clips the view to that shape. Let's try running this with those clip shapes. So let's tap here, and there we have our button splitting into 4 different parts, or what seems like it's splitting into 4 different parts, when in reality it's 4 different contents. Let's tweak a little bit the animation and the effect. Let's run once more. And there we have our split effect. And that was all. So we created our split modifier that does this. It splits the view into 4 and then executes an action. I had never tried simulating this split effect. I hope you had as much fun as I did. Bye.